Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the End in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin, and I'm really excited for you all to meet Hannah. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm like so pumped to just see where this conversation goes. But before we get into it, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, how you got started, a little bit more about your business?
Yeah. So I'm a holistic coach. I feel like it's really tough to label yourself because that's such a generic term, but that's what we go with. I'm a holistic coach. I have my own business, Journey to Well, and I work with clients virtually, one-on-one coaching, really helping empower people, women specifically. I work with mostly women, empower women to up level their business, achieve their version of peak performance, avoid burnout. We have all of these kind of taglines, but I use tools like human design, cycle alignment, and somatic breathwork because they've been tools that have made the biggest difference in my life. So we can get into human design, and I know we will, but I have my well, we're just going to call it like arrows. I have a left arrow, which is kind of the like internal story, living your life in terms of like what you're experiencing and sharing what you actually experience with people in it versus like if you have a right facing arrow, typically people spend a little bit more time like focused on the collective and really how to help the collective. So anyway, I've learned that I need to share what I have experienced in my life, and that's what I do. And human design, cycle alignment, and somatic breathwork have truly been the tools that have really shifted my life, and that's really where I've kind of put my business is sharing those tools with other humans so they can up level and achieve their version of peak performance versus feeling like we have to live in so much force.
Oh my gosh. You know how much I love it. Even in our pre-call when we met each other, it was like instant. You have to come on and speak with everyone and just share your knowledge. I did share with you, and a lot of the listeners also know I've done like a human design and marketing program with a
Mhm.
colleague of mine. So I have seen firsthand how powerful it is, like for my own business, but also for the clients that we worked with. And that was just through a marketing lens. So
Yeah.
what you're helping do is really like this personal development piece, which is so important for becoming a CEO. I mean, in my experience, the more I tried to ignore it, the worse, it got over time.
Yeah, we get filled with so much comparison. I mean, that's just a normal thing, right? We just compare ourselves to what we see on Instagram and people's highlight reels, and we compare ourselves our entire time growing up. And that may come from like comments too of like your parents making a comment about you. Like I'll give a personal example. And they say it in love. I don't blame my mom, but when I was in college, she would make comments like, Hannah, you spend so many plates. Like you always have so much on your plate. And part of me took that like, is something wrong with me? Like, am I doing too much? Am I going to burn out eventually? And come fast forward, come to learn she's a projector. And so projectors do really well doing one thing at a time. They need their rest, they need their breaks. And that's really their zone of genius because projectors are the guides, right? They're here to kind of like see the big picture and let us know how we can do things better. And she does really well with taking breaks and kind of separating herself from other people's energy. And I'm a manifesting generator. So I actually do really well spinning a lot of plates. So before I knew human design, I had that like kind of inner critic creep up and be like, is something wrong with me? Am I doing this life thing wrong or this business wrong? And then we learn human design and it's like a big permission slip. And I always, every time I talk about it, I'm like, I just have to take a deep exhale and remember who you were designed to be, how your energy is designed to move through this world. And same with cycle alignment, right? Like, we're not created as women to perform like men. And we don't have that 24-hour clock. We have a 27-day clock. So when we feel like uber productive and on top of the world and our hormones are at their peak and we feel so great and we feel like going out and celebrating and being really social, and then we hit our luteal phase and we're like, don't fucking talk to me. Don't touch me. And then we're like, oh my gosh, is something wrong with me? Like, am I bipolar? Do I have depression? Like, burn everything to the ground? Is my life ending? And learning these tools are, again, it's just such a permission slip. It's like, once you know it, then you can accept it and you can accept yourself deeper. And how that affects your business is, I mean, literally in every way. You show up more confidently. You can plan your months much more effectively and efficiently. You can actually harness your energy of when you have more inward energy during the luteal phase, let's say. You can harness that like ability to tap into your insight during your menstrual phase. And then you can harness that I'm going to be super productive in my follicular and ovulation phase. And you can harness your manifesting generator energy or your projector reflector energy. And you have so much. Honestly, it's like I use the analogy of walking through quicksand. Like that's kind of how I felt like I was moving through my life, was walking through quicksand, and every step, every milestone took a lot of efforting. And then you learn this human design and cyclealignment tools and you're like, oh, I didn't know life could be this easy. Is it allowed to be this easy? Like that's a huge question.
It's so good. A few years ago, I shared on this show how much ease was like the next phase of life for me. And a
Mm,
lot of people laugh because I'm like 28 years old, you know.
yeah.
But living in a certain level of like childhood experiences and definitely a lot of traumatic experiences,
Mm,
I it's very similar to you, like felt like I was definitely living in quicksand, but also like nothing good was supposed to happen to me
yeah.
because every step I took, right, there was something else coming up, which is just life, you know. I
Yeah.
quickly learned, but yeah, like making me the problem. And I love how you help your clients find these tools to realize, hey, maybe this is an external factor, but it doesn't
Mm,
have to directly impact your internal trajectory of like where you want to go to.
yeah.
In my experience, I would love to share this with the listeners as well, like from a business standpoint. It felt like I could never finish anything to like the fullest ability. Do you get that with your clients a lot? I'm sure they ask you that question.
Are you a managen? I don't even know your human design.
I'm actually a
A
generator.
generator. Okay. Um, yeah. So, I mean, definitely, I feel like it comes up with manager. That's kind of the stereotype. Every energy type kind of has their own stereotype, and manifesting generators is always like we start so many things and we can never finish them, which is true and not true. I think for me, I have a decent completion rate, but I think honestly, Caitlin, I think where that comes from is we don't really know what our purpose is or what the purpose is behind what we're doing in our business, because every business coach, every marketing tool is telling you if you do this, you will be successful. If you post every day, you'll gain 1,000 followers in a month, because I did and it worked for me, and so it will work for you. And so we post 15 days in a row and we're like, I don't have anything else to post. I'm literally like Googling ideas or searching my favorite Instagrammer and trying to copy their posts. And I'm halfway through this whole journey and I've only gained 2 followers. What's wrong with me? And then we go through that shame cycle and that spiral, and then we kind of give up because we aren't seeing the results, and we blame ourselves and we think something's wrong with us, and we continue that cycle, right? Like, and then we can't really show up on social media for a while, or we show up but we feel like we're showing up inauthentically, or whatever it is, whatever the case may be. But we're never asking ourselves, what is the purpose behind that exercise that I was doing? And is it really how it's going to work for me? Just because it worked for someone else, I don't think they're lying. I think, marketing gimmicks, of course, they're a thing. People lie. But I think generally people share what works for them, and they're truthful about it. But I mean, if we're just coming from a human design standpoint, what's their energy type? What are their channels? What are their gifts? What gates do they have defined? What energy centers do they have defined? And how, and I mean, what is their purpose behind making this, whatever 30-day post? That's a silly example, but yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to when people have trouble completing things. It's really, we need to ask ourselves, why am I even doing this in the first place? And does this align with my energy? Is this a yes for me?
Right. Oh my gosh. Okay, perfect. And I feel like what you're touching on, and I would love to go into this topic deeper with you,
Yeah.
because it's interesting. Even when you were describing that, I was like, maybe I am able to complete things. Like I can be extremely efficient,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of it was managing my expectations, like thinking, okay, I'll be able to get 10 clients and I won't have to worry at all about money anymore.
Yeah.
Like stories that we tell ourselves, those narratives. And I see this happening everywhere right now. Like, I don't know if it's retrograde ending, which I think just happened, thank
Yeah.
goodness. But everyone had like the highest expectations, all the lovely women in my life. And it's really hard to see them let down, and they think, okay, well, I'll do this and I'll get this perfect outcome. And how
Mm.
do you help your clients like release some of that expectations that they put on themselves?
Ooh, I love that question. So I'm going to give you a pretty solid answer of where we can go. So first of all, my biggest, probably the thing that I teach the most to my clients is we look at what's called your authority in human design. And so we can have an emotional authority, a sacral, splenic authority, outer authority, lunar authority, sounding board authority. And our authority is how we make decisions. It's also, in my opinion, kind of like how we can tune into our bodies to begin to learn that communication, that language of our body, to see what is a yes, what is a no. So emotional authorities make up about 40 or 36% of the population. So it's the largest group. Emotional authorities means you have a defined emotional center, which simply means that you need to be able to ride your emotions before making a decision. Sacral authority, splenic authority, those are the third and second and third. I can't do math. Second and third most prominent. Sacral authority is like our gut response when we say trust your gut. If you don't have a defined sacral center, you might not even really know what that means. You might not be able to find that consistent access to your gut, your guttural response. And our splenic authority is trust your instincts. So like, oh, I just kind of feel like the vibes are off here, or I feel that this isn't the right decision for me. And we can keep going on through all the authorities, but that is the first way when we're feeling inconsistent, when we're feeling like, I don't know if this is the right decision for me. That's the first thing that I would say, go learn your authority, and then begin to play around with, is this a yes? Is this a no? Your body's always talking to you. One of the things that I point out is we only have 2 energy centers in our head. We have our crown and our ajna. We have 7 energy centers in our body. Your body is constantly telling you what's going on, what the right choice is, how this is. You can tune in to check in with like, how is this affecting me? And we're not going to get into the whole nervous system conversation, but we need to make sure our nervous system's regulated, because like when you're talking about trauma, your body might be saying like, this isn't safe, when it's just a trauma response, not an actual this isn't safe response. So we kind of have to like look there. But that's one way that we begin to tap into managing expectations. Like, is this something that I'm deeply connected to? Like, let's chat about our why. Why are you doing this? What is your purpose behind this? The second thing is a little bit more nuanced, but if you've talked about human design, hopefully some people that are listening have a little bit of a foundation. Look at your ego center. So your ego center is the smallest energy center in the human design chart. If you're looking at the body graph chart, it's kind of in the middle on the right. It's like a small triangle. Look if it's colored in or not. This is where we get really wild with managing expectations and like biting off more than I can chew. If you have an undefined ego center, which the majority of us, mine's actually defined, but the majority of us have an undefined ego center. Our ego center is our center of determination, of motivation, of, I like to call it like our ability to follow through. So for me, I always say I'm like stubborn, like I'm stubbornly going to complete what I started because I need that like satisfaction of completing it. But that's really my defined ego center speaking. And it's like, you started this, finish it, see it to its completion. If we have an undefined ego center, we might be meeting with our business coach, we might be scrolling, taking a marketing class or something like that. And they give us all of these examples, all of these things to try and start implementing to gain more clients. And we start with like sprinting, right? Like we start so great and then we're like, oh my God, I can't follow through. What's wrong with me? Like, why don't I have the motivation to do this? We might need to have a conversation about if you have a defined ego center or undefined ego center. And all that simply means is when it's undefined, we have inconsistent access to the energy of that center. And this center is our motivation, kind of our like, there's also a lot of like financial stuff that goes on with the ego center. And it's not that you don't have motivation. It's not that you're not motivated. You just might not have that consistent access. And for me, I see a lot of clients with undefined ego centers that do tend in the best spirits, like they do it with the best of intentions, but they tend to bite off a little bit more than they can chew. So those are two like very structured ways that we can begin to explore, use human design to explore if you feel like you're someone that needs to, like kind of you were saying, manage your expectations, or you have the best of intentions, but you just can't stick to it. Check out those areas.
That's great advice, like really tangible. So I appreciate that too. And I think a lot of business owners don't realize that when you start a business, like you are also in sales, and
Mm-hmm.
having those expectations of the sales. Even my fiance is in sales, and we've talked about this a lot. Like now he's been in his company for 3 years.
Cool.
But releasing the outcome even of the sale, like
Yeah.
knowing I've put in everything that I could, and this is either for that person or me,
Yeah.
or not for that person or me.
Yeah.
And not really like tangibly placing our identity on top of, those outcomes too. So I really appreciate like those tangible, being able to look at your chart and see, am I just placing like this undefined ego center, onto this person? Because it also helps me lead with love around like providing that potential new client with
Mm.
the best outcome, which may not be working with me, but I'm happy
Right.
to see them elsewhere,
Right. Yeah. It's really trusting, I think, which is such a practice, and like nobody's mastered it, I don't think, but it's really trusting that I believe what I have to offer is valuable, but I also acknowledge that it's not for everyone. Maybe human design doesn't work for you. Maybe cycle alignment doesn't work for you, and that's okay. And I would rather work with people that are so invested and so intrigued and curious to learn about this than convincing them, oh,
Yeah.
this is going to change your life, because it might not. If they don't believe that, maybe something else, or timing, right? Maybe it's just not the right time.
Yeah, that's been it a lot in my experience too. And that's one thing that I love about social media is it connects you back to those people, like
Yeah.
tends to be around those perfect times when maybe you didn't work together for X amount of time or they're coming back. So yeah,
Mhm.
I love the wrapping in of the human design into the sales aspect because I haven't talked a lot about that on the show. And I
Mhm.
think that so many people underutilize human design when it comes to business, and
Yeah.
that's really what you're helping people do. And it may feel like they're slowing down to speed up to like learn all of these things about
Yeah.
ourselves. But in the end, it's like the best possible outcome. At least in my experience, it was definitely
Yeah. Yeah,
me.
we have that learning gap, right? Like we have that necessity to slow down. However, I will also add, it should feel like this coming home, this acknowledgement of who you are, or maybe how you used to do something until you learned like this is the best way, to do this, and then you changed. But you're feeling like kind of that like forceful energy. You're feeling like you're walking in that quicksand. So it really should feel like this, oh, I can do it the way that I wanted to do it. Or this is the way that my energy actually moves. Oh, I didn't know that. Like, again, with my mom, she's always talking about rest, make sure that you rest. And that is like one of projectors' biggest gifts is they find the insight, they find their clarity when they are out of other people's energy fields. And by that I mean like literally, like we're in each other's energy fields, even though we're not sitting next to each other right now. We're still like exchanging energy because we're having this conversation. So projectors do really well to like get out, and so does everyone, I mean, to some extent, but that's really their gift. Where I do really well like being stimulated and having, and generators too, like, and I think you said this in managing your expectations, but making sure that you're doing what lights you up, like doing what you love, and that's where you get energy. Generators, not that we all need rest, we're human beings, but so not that you don't need rest and I don't need rest, but I find that I have way lower energy when I'm not doing what lights me up versus if I'm just not sleeping well. Like I could have a bad night's sleep and I'm having conversations and working with clients and being in my environment, which is external markets, and I do fine all day. But when I'm
Yeah.
not doing what I love, when I'm not being stimulated and I, whatever, have like an off day or a slow season, that's when I feel like I'm just insatiably tired and I can get all the sleep and all the rest and get out of other people's energy fields as much as I want. And it doesn't help.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot actually. Like within my business now, this is our seventh year, but
Yeah.
I realized like I do not want to be creating content,
Yep.
like that's just like I'm happy to guide the visionary process of it,
Mm-hmm.
and like train my team.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that you said what lights you up because I had to realize that I'm supposed to be like leading people, not, in the thick of like the content creation process.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also a challenge to like detach from that identity of being the doer,
Yep.
doing all the things, to just leading, which is can be more tiring at times, identity shift because I was
Yep.
just so not used to it. But like over long periods of time, it's like this is so easy,
Yeah.
Now I don't have to be like creating content or,
Yeah.
doing the miscellaneous tasks. But it does take business owners time. And I love what you said about patience at the beginning of this conversation. It's like you can't rush into anything, really. You need to give yourself the time to settle in and ask yourself these questions, not just once, like maybe multiple times.
Yeah.
In my marketing clients, I see that especially. They're
Mm-hmm.
so quick to, like my consulting clients, they're quick to change or add another thing to their plate. And I'm like, but wait, we have to figure out if this even works, like if this structure even works, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, shiny object syndrome, right? We always think, oh, this is a better way to do things. That's actually business. Where who did I hear it from? I don't remember, but that's one of our biggest downfalls. One of our
Yeah.
biggest problems is like the shiny object syndrome. We try something for a couple weeks and we're like, oh, it doesn't work, on to the next thing. And people that have the most successful businesses, they're the ones that have done the same thing, ran the same program over and over and over again. And you show your efficacy and your validity. Although, I mean, a whole conversation, we need to talk about that in terms of gens because we like to change things. So like it's finding the balance. It truly is an underlying, like taking that advice and then making it work for you, right?
Mhm.
So I switch up my business a lot. I podcast, I see clients one-on-one. I have a group coaching container. I do in-person breath work, in-person women's circles. And then pepper in like all this random stuff just because I'm a crazy person. And travel, right? Like, but I'm always offering these three tools. I'm always talking about human design, cyclealignment, somatic breathwork, and there's little branches outside of those, but we're always coming back to those three tools. And that's how I'm kind of staying consistent, but not getting bored for manifesting generators. And you need to look at your energy type, find what works for you, or what you did, Caitlin. Like I learned after however many years, I don't want to create the content. So you're still doing the same business, right? But you're the way that you are showing up in your business has changed. And that's really the beauty of it. You don't have to change careers because you're like, ah, fuck this, like content creation. You just need to figure out how you can make it work for you.
Yeah, I love that you said that. It's like living in solutions. That's
Mm,
what I see a lot of people that have mastered, like yourself, that have mastered this evolution of consciousness, of
yeah.
understanding like why are people the way they are? Why do they think the way they think? And not working against it constantly with through the tools that you provide, you're able to help your clients see that like in themselves. But I
Mhm.
know externally as a coach, like I see this in my clients all the time, and I want to encourage them to go after what is lighting them up and what seems
Mhm.
exciting. And at the same time, they're hiring me for consistency, you know?
Mhm.
So it's kind of like this balance that you mentioned with the human design and really being able to look at what makes sense and how can I have multiple careers under one LLC or like one
Sure.
business. And now over the years it's funny, like they'll ask me like if I'm would be open to being hired full time or coming back and working with them in person, and I'm like, that is such an honor, but that
Yeah.
is so out of alignment right now, like in this season of my life. Who knows if
Mhm.
that will change?
Mhm.
But just being able to like know internally that I don't have to turn them down entirely, but I can say, hey, I can't work 9 to 5, but I can make this, and this work. What
Mhm.
makes me great is our team, because I'm not doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
Mhm.
So being able to know that now about my business has definitely been helpful. And I think a lot of our listeners are maybe in the shiny object syndrome state of business because it's just a season. It's not
Mhm.
anything to feel bad, like if you are in
Mhm.
that state. But like yourself, you've been able to have all of these pockets of things that you can jump back and forth between, instead of it, because it can get stagnant and boring over the
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, it does. I mean, if we do anything forever, I think most people would get bored and want to change and shift things up. But really, what we're doing, I think, in the conversation of like the shiny objects, how I explain my business is we're laying a foundation, we're building a foundation. So I don't tend to coach and mentor my clients on specific things that often. I mean, of course, we can get into the specifics, But really, I think my zone of genius and really what my focus is to zoom out, look at the foundation that you're building, right? Like using the analogy of a house, you need to build a strong foundation. Everything else can come apart. You can change the little like paint on your house, the light fixtures. You can even change like the walls around your house as long as you have that strong foundation. And so we're moving from here is this very niche marketing strategy, which is important. I'm not saying that it's not. We need to get there. But I think when we start there, we're like starting at the top instead of the bottom of a pyramid. And if we start at the bottom, we lay the foundation, then what you find is that this is going to permeate into all areas of your life. Like you learn human design for your business, but then you start applying it to your relationships. And you learn cycle alignment for your business, how you can tap into like your follicular phase, right? And what type of work you can be doing in your follicular phase. But then you notice that it's flowing into the foods that you're eating and the way that you're working out and the way that you're dealing with your partner and responding to your partner and how you're treating yourself. It's always coming back to yourself, especially as business owners. Really, the most important relationship is the one we have with ourselves. But we start, so like kind of even saying I'm a business coach, right? Like we're reeling people in. You're coming to me for your business, but what we're really doing is restructuring the foundation of how you approach pretty much everything in your life without having to talk about everything in your life. And then you're going to see how that permeates into different areas. And that I think when we learn that, then it's like, oh, I don't need to run over there and do my business this way, or I don't need to switch this up. And I can check in with myself. What do I actually love? What really lights me up in my business? Because we're not meant to do it all alone. You're actually meant to do everything in community, and that includes your business. So once you're able to go outside, hire out, add people to your team, even take things, I think you and I talked about this, but like take things off your plate, like hire a cleaner, ask your partner to cook you dinner, or kind of play around with the idea of, is it okay with me to order out 3 days a week? So then I'm not spending an hour cooking dinner and I'm able to put that hour into whatever is going to be more useful for my business and business growth. These are all questions that we get to ask ourselves as we're beginning to tune into, again, what is this yes? What does this yes feel like? What does the no feel like? Because when we don't know, like when we haven't developed that communication, it's like, oh yeah, no, I should hire a cleaner. Maybe you need to clean your house because you actually that's your break. Or maybe you need to cook. I like to cook. Cooking is not tiring for me. So I actually want to cook. I create that time in my day, and that's my break from work. So it's like finding those things, right? But if we're not checking in with our body and we're not checking in with ourselves, we might hear this tip like hire a cleaner or hire out. And you're like, wait, what do I even hire out for? What do I like? What don't I like? And it's always returning. Everything in my human design perspective, everything comes back to our authority. Always checking in with your authority and building that communication.
It's such a good point too, and for the listeners, so they start to like hear in my episodes where I'm coming from, like I'm a sacral authority. So I know immediately when something's for me or not for me, like I can actually physically feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to mention this as well. Like when I was first figuring this out about myself, because of my trauma that you mentioned, I thought like everything was traumatizing in life. Like
Yeah.
at one point, I was like, maybe I just shouldn't speak. Like I shouldn't leave the house. It will be easier that way. Like I won't
Right.
feel traumatized, you
Yeah.
know? And that's where I think the patience aspect came in for me because I do find so much value in these conversations, in communication, in being a leader. So, yeah, it was a lot when I first opened up this part of myself, but
Mm.
over time, it feels so right. Like today I have two more podcast recordings and then I'll probably like work throughout, but it's like that feels good for a Tuesday. Yesterday I was in my luteal phase, so I didn't really leave my bedroom,
Yeah.
Like I want to be honest with people because I think we're so quick to judge like what that looks like. But I'm a business owner and I still have days like that, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like with the trauma aspect, and everyone has dealt with trauma, I think that's a really big topic that we need to talk more about. Big T and little t trauma, and recognizing and acknowledging that trauma, Gabor Mate says that trauma isn't what happens to you, it's your response to it. So you and I could go through the same situation. We could be siblings and grow up in the same household, and how whatever traumatic situations happened, how that affects you and I are going to could be completely different. So normalize that first of all. And yes, then we do need to acknowledge, we need to back up and make sure that our responses, like our bodily responses, are coming from a place of clarity, a place of self, if we're talking in terms of like IFS, internal family systems. Like we need to be coming from a place of self to then tap into our sacral authority or our splenic authority. Or I mean, like we have like a G center or our heart authority. We need to make sure to check ourselves before we get into that conversation, which is kind of, we haven't talked about breath work, but that's really where my breath work, that's where, yeah, my breathwork offer comes in. Is I'm trained in a specific form of breathwork called somatic breathwork, and I've done a decent amount. I'm by no means an expert, but a decent amount of somatic healing and somatic training, because we do need to make sure, like when our bodies are in that fight or flight, everything feels big. Going on and recording a podcast feels big. We feel anxious. We feel on edge. We feel hyper vigilant. We feel very frazzled, and that would bleed into all areas of your business. So thank you for bringing that up, because we really do need to acknowledge and have conversations about it. I'm like, trauma feels so big, and I understand that it's not something that we need to like air our dirty laundry out, but finding a safe person, whether that's a therapist, a coach, someone trained, preferably, not a friend, not a parent, to hold that space and witness you in that we really do need patience. That, like, if you think about building a muscle at the gym, right? We don't go to the gym one time and develop like great abs or great bicep muscles. So nervous system regulation is the same way. Learning the communication of your body, tapping into your authority is the same way. It's not this one time, oh yeah, that's my sacral yes speaking to me. This is a journey, and it's a development, and there's going to be times where we feel really off. And then we come back to the drawing board and we try another way to connect, and we do a little bit more trauma healing. And it's a journey. That's why my business is called Journey to Well. Like at first it was well, and I'm like, no, no, no. Well is not a destination. It truly is a journey. It's the journey to well that is your life. It's not getting well and now I'm healed and happy and whole.
Right, right. And I do think some things on social media give that view, and then people don't understand why they have to continue working on themselves. And I'm so happy that you mentioned your breath work portion, because in my experience, that was some of the most largest shifts. Also
Mm-hmm.
Reiki, out of breath work sessions. And I actually did breath work every morning, Joe Dispenza, when I was like going through my really horrible bouts of PTSD,
Yep.
uh, like really intense flashbacks. And that was the only thing that made me feel super comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
My fiance was also aware of what was happening. So he would be like, are you okay? Like, just could tell I was a little off. And I was like, probably in the midst of a flashback. So then we
Yep.
would like a crystal or just get back into the present moment. Cooking, a lot of my clients talk about if they don't like meditating,
Mhm.
things that feel mindless, can be really helpful just for our listeners if you are still earlier on in your journey. But thank you so much, Hannah. I love the name of your business, and I feel like it marries perfectly with the end in mind and how you help your clients, come about to that. So how can everyone get in touch with you? Do you have any upcoming offers or anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, thanks. So I mostly hang out on Instagram. My handle is at underscore journey to well. I would say that's where I spend the majority of my time. I also have a podcast, so you can definitely check out the podcast. It's also called Journey to Well. Pretty much everywhere I'm Journey to Well. YouTube too is, I think, underscore Journey to Well. I think my biggest thing that's not necessarily upcoming, it's kind of you can join at any time, but my group mentorship container, if you're interested in learning about cycle alignment and human design, but not this like intense deep dive where that's really what my one-on-one container is we meet weekly and for an hour and we do a whole human design chart reading and we kind of go through all of these pieces of our chart. If you're looking, I like to say that I'm a wader. I like to wade into water and like wade into situations. So if you're more of a wader and you like to dip your toe in, that's where my group mentorship container comes in. It's called Sync, and you can learn all about it through the link in my bio on Instagram. But it's truly this really beautiful opportunity to gather together with like-minded people too. We didn't talk about that. We talked a little bit about community, but building community is really the most important part of my life and my business. So we get to gather together. We have breathwork sessions once a month. We have online modules and training. We get together and just meet to talk. We have masterminds and there's a lot of juicy stuff in Sync. So that would be my biggest and best offer.
I love the name of your program. That is like
Thanks.
perfect marketing because syncing with your cycle, you're syncing with your human design. It's like the marriage of both. And yeah, just for our listeners, as a lot of them know, I've talked a lot about how lonely being a business owner can be,
Yeah.
and it can feel so heavy. So please reach out to Hannah. I'm sure she can answer any questions in the DMs that you may have about Sync or any of her other offers. And then if you all are multitasking, just DM me on Instagram and I will connect you all with her. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Caitlin. This is great.